Welcome to the 64th meeting of the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Before us we have the Honourable Gary Goodyear, Minister of State for Science and Technology, as well as the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. Along with him, we have from the Department of Industry, Robert Dunlop, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister, Science and Innovation Sector. From the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, Bruce Archibald, the President. Linda Kuzno, Chief Financial Officer, Information Management and Informatics, as well as Claire Gartley, Vice President, Business Innovation and Community Development. Ladies and gentlemen, before I call on the Minister to go ahead with his opening remarks, I should tell you that on May 2nd, Minister Paradis and Minister Bernier have confirmed that they will be here for the first hour with us from 3:30 till 4:30 on that date. So we had already made our schedule and mentioned some flexibility, and so they will be taking that slot. So without any further delay, then, Minister Goodyear, it's good to have you here for us, and please go ahead and with your opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that very much. Good morning, committee members and honourable colleagues. It is indeed a pleasure to be here again with you to answer questions and share information about the science and technology issues as they relate to my portfolio and the main estimates. And given that my portfolio also includes the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, I'm more than happy to speak to you about the overall efforts in that regard as well. Since 2006, our government has provided more than $9 billion in new resources to support science, technology, and business innovation. This funding has helped to make Canada a world leader in post-secondary education research and to create the knowledge and highly skilled workforce that businesses require. We continue to work on this in this regard as well to innovate and create even more high-valued jobs. Now, Economic Action Plan 2013, the latest budget, builds on this foundation, helping to position Canada for stability and long-term economic prosperity, as well as a higher quality of life for Canadians, while again sticking to our promise of keeping taxes low for families and businesses and balancing the budget by 2015. We are working to strengthen Canada's world-class research talent through such programs as the Vanier Canada Graduate Scholarships, the Banting Postdoctoral Fellowships, the Canada Excellence Research Chairs Programs, and many others. Economic Action Plan yet again further strengthens our advanced research capacity by providing another ongoing $37 million in new annual support for research partnerships with industry through the granting councils. We are strengthening research infrastructure as well through the Canada Foundation for Innovation. As you know, 2013 budget allocates $225 million to support new competitions, cyber infrastructure, and sustain its operations. As well, delivering programs that enhance collaboration, partnerships among the private and public sectors. Programs such as the Centres of Excellence in Commercialization and Research, business-led networks of Centres of Excellence, the Industrial Research and Development Internships, the College and Community Innovation Program, all aim to build industry academic connections that we know will lead to new products and processes in the marketplace. As well, if I can take a moment to take this opportunity to highlight some of the findings in the recent Council of Canadian Academies report on the state of Canada's science and technology enterprise as it currently exists. The report concluded that Canadian science and technology is healthy and growing in both output and impact, with Canada being the only G7 country to have achieved an increase above the world average in the number of scientific papers produced between 2005 and 2010. The report also notes that there has been a net migration of researchers into Canada. This is probably the most profound and irrefutable evidence that our strategy here in Canada is working, and we should continue. So, of course, Budget 2013 focuses on the drivers of growth and job creation, which does include innovation, investment, education, skills, and healthy communities. This approach promotes business innovation through improved support for high-growth companies, research collaborations, procurement opportunities, applied research, risk financing, and so on. Some of those measures include $121 million over 2 years for the National Research Council to help continue its transformation, $20 million in over 3 years for a National Research Council Industrial Research Assistance Program pilot project initiative to help small businesses access the research capacity and services at our post-secondary institutions and not-for-profit research institutions of their choice. $325 million over 8 years to the Sustainable Development Technology Canada to continue support for the development and the demonstration of new, clean technologies that can create efficiencies in businesses and help them with their bottom line, as well as contribute, obviously, to a cleaner environment and a more sustainable economic development. $60 million over 5 years to help high-potential incubators and accelerators, a new entrepreneurship award that celebrates Canadian entrepreneurs, and $18 million over 2 years to the Canadian Youth Business Foundation to help young entrepreneurs. Significant investments, obviously, in Budget 2013 are also targeted toward human health and genomics, a very, very exciting basic research area, skills training, manufacturing, aerospace, space sectors, infrastructure, and I could go on and on. Now, given the level of business expenditures on research, science, and development, we want businesses to pursue innovation-based strategies that encourage them to increase their investments in machinery, equipment, and help them gain access to highly skilled personnel and be more globally competitive. So our recent Action Plan 2013 included many new measures to do exactly that. Now, in addition to the science and tech portfolio, I am honored to be the Minister of State for FedDev Ontario. This agency has been around for a few years and, in my view, has made incredible efforts within Southern Ontario to effectively support growth and long-term prosperity. As you might know, Southern Ontario, the area that we work in, has approximately 12 million people, about 36% of the population of Canada. It is the heart of Canada's commercial core and does have incredible potential to create long-term success. And of course, the agency has funded hundreds and hundreds of projects in Southern Ontario in this regard. But it's not just money that the agency is working with. We are advocates for the region, co-veners, and we are bringing together stakeholders, focusing on clusters, collaborations, partnerships, building critical mass to again get that edge on global competitiveness. Some of the programs we have, and I'll be very brief, the Applied Research Commercialization Initiative, for instance, has facilitated the development of hundreds of partnerships between the post-secondary institutions in Southern Ontario and businesses. In fact, 560 businesses have been involved with students who get the added benefit of a real-world educational experience. The Prosperity Initiative we've put forward to help target investments to advance key economic growth in Southern Ontario, including advanced manufacturing, digital media, green construction, and green automotive. I'll give you another quick example of what this has done. We've made a significant investment in Western University's Fraunhofer project. This is a center for commercialization of advanced manufacturing technology. These centers will create opportunities literally for hundreds of businesses to collaborate with our educational institutions and not-for-profits to support global competitiveness coming out of Southern Ontario in sectors, frankly, that are in the aerospace, defense, construction, medical devices, composite lightweight materials, another very exciting area of potential, automotive, and the renewable energy sector. The facility itself, I should tell you, represents North America's premier hub for the development, the validation, and the industrial scale testing of new advanced manufacturing materials and products. But we've also taken it upon ourselves to create a sense of curiosity for the next generation of business leaders with our Youth STEM program, which has the folks involved in that have reached about 1.1 million kids in Southern Ontario to get them stirred up about science and mathematics. Our Scientists and Engineers in Business initiative, up to $7.5 million. We invested in this one project, Venture Start. Venture Start is a partnership of 12 research innovation centres throughout Southern Ontario, of course. It has already delivered entrepreneurship training to 128 highly qualified graduates, as well as providing mentoring support and seed financing for 88 new startup businesses. That's so far. But by the end of March 2014, Venture Start tells me that they are online to fund 224 startup businesses. Now, through other programs like Investing in Business Innovation, we're boosting private sector investment. This is an angel venture capital program to help businesses quickly bring their new ideas to market. And we've been able to have significant leverage in this regard. I can tell you that the angel network in Southern Ontario has grown from about 250 angels to well over 800 as a result of this program. Now, I'll just briefly summarize that there are a suite of programs I'm happy to talk about, but mainly they fit under what we call the Southern Ontario Advantage Initiatives, and under that program, that suite of programs, we've invested more than $420 million in funding, resulting in partnerships with more than 5,000 organizations and over $1.2 billion of additional funds leveraged for these investments, and those are almost exclusively non-governmental sources, as well as over $2 billion in a boost to the GDP. Now, in closing, Mr. Chair, I am pleased that Economic Action Plan provides an additional $920 million over 5 years, which is basically renewing FedDev Ontario. This will start in April 2014 with $200 million of this renewal support to be allocated for the delivery of a new advanced manufacturing fund in Ontario. The government's renewed commitment to the agency is clearly based on its success in creating jobs, increasing productivity, and competitiveness in Southern Ontario. There's still obviously a great depth of potential in the region. I look forward to witnessing future successes in our incredible communities, casting great growth for them, for the nation, as well as continuing to grow the science and tech sector in Canada. Mr. Chair, thank you for this time, and I look forward to answer any questions the members may have with regard to my portfolio. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for your opening remarks, Minister Goodyear. Now on to Mr. Laird for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming here today. You and I had the opportunity to take part in an announcement recently in Toronto, the Genome Canada announcement, funding announcement, and I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Stephen Shearer, world-leading researcher based right here in Canada, working on the Autism Genome Project. We hear wonderful things about great research being done across this country time and time again, and despite that, we hear you in the House of Commons having to answer questions from the opposition as well as questions from the media with respect to this apparent muzzling of scientists. And I suspect that as we go through the course of this meeting today, the opposition parties will continue to weave that fiction. You've consistently responded that there hasn't been a government in Canadian history that has invested in science and technology to the extent that our government has, and how proud we are to promote the work, the important work that our scientists are doing. You provided wonderful evidence, I think, demonstrating the extent to which we share research material, the extent to which we publish research findings, and that our scientists provide thousands of interviews per year regarding their work and lecture at conferences all over the world. Despite all of this, again, as we'll probably hear a little bit later today, the opposition continues to kind of weave their fiction, play political games with this. Maybe what you could do is, if you could just share with us sort of some facts and figures that might help clearly dispute any notion that our scientists are muzzled.
Well, thank you for that question. And with respect to the parts of the science and tech file in Canada that I'm responsible for, and I think I do speak for some of my other colleagues when I say that, we are very, very proud of the work that our scientists and our academic community, these are world-class people. We absolutely understand that research findings and their benefits must be effectively communicated and shared with Canadians. In fact, our government has in place, we've put in place pieces, foundational pieces that actually call and guide to support open and transparent communications. In fact, in accordance with the government policy regarding government scientists, I can tell you that they do in fact regularly provide media interviews. They publish thousands and thousands of research papers. In fact, some numbers here, Environment Canada has provided more than 1,300 media interviews. Scientists in that one area have published some 524 articles. There are reports that we are leading the world in some cases on our published articles. The official communications policy directs federal departments and agencies to properly address media inquiries. Federal scientists, as you know, are nonpartisan. They do their work to achieve the results that they're after. They're very professional. They do not comment on government policy. This is a role that we are required to leave to ministers who, as people can understand, are primarily responsible for their files. With respect to your first question about the unprecedented funding, if I may, Mr. Chair, there is no question that this government has provided more funding in its time than any other government in the history of this country. And if I can just close that question with a quote, a reference from the Canadian Council of Academics, which is an independent body. Quote, "There is much for Canadians to be proud of as Canada's international reputation is strong. Science and technology research is robust across the country. And globally, we are considered to have world-leading research infrastructure and programs. The panel's findings are comprehensive and represent one of the most in-depth examinations of Canadian science and technology ever undertaken." That's from the chair of the panel, Dr. Elliot Phillipson. And hopefully that answered your question.
Sure. Thank you. Just want to move to talking about that investment in science and technology, and something that's, that I find interesting is always this debate about funding basic versus applied research. If you look at the government's record on investment research, investment in research, you clearly see that we have made significant investments on both areas of research. I've talked about the genome side, so on the basic side of the research equation, the NRC transformation on the applied side, Canadian Foundation for Innovation, which you mentioned in your opening remarks, which kind of invests in both. So maybe what you can speak to now is when you're making this investment, when we talk about those significant investments, what is the appropriate balance when it comes to basic versus applied research?
Listen, I think you've hit the issue right on the head. I can tell you my point is that it's not one or the other. It's actually finding the balance between the two. We do support basic research, and we have always supported basic research. I see no reason not to continue to do that. But when it comes to basic or applied funding, it really is more important, I think, to look at the bigger picture of science in general and determine first of all, what investments are most important for Canada, for Canadians at this particular time, but not just in the economy, but in terms of our social needs and our economic needs, of course. So it's for me anyways, it's not one or the other. It is about finding the balance and continuing to support both. Perhaps I can tell you, maybe I'll just read another quote here. I just see this here. Gilles Patry is the president of the Canadian Foundation for Innovation. He recently stated, "All research, whether it is applied or yet to be applied, is at the service of society. And since no one can predict where the next economic, social, or environmental breakthrough will come from, it is vital that the full spectrum of research be supported. This is the established policy of the Government of Canada, and we encourage you to continue," end quote. And we will, because I totally agree with that.
Good.
20 seconds.
Yeah, I think my question would take more than that, so I'll...
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lake. And now on to Mr. Stewart for 7 minutes.
Chair, thank you, Minister, for coming today. I think this is one of the most important portfolios that the government has, so it's a pleasure to share it with you.
I couldn't agree more.
And many of the programs you mentioned, of course, worth funding. So I'd like to talk about your just your opening statement, where you say our government has provided $9 billion in new funding since 2006. So I'd like to substantiate this figure and really let Canadians know what we're talking about here. A cursory result of this reveals that the source of this figure is from CanSim table 3580142, and perhaps your officials can confirm this. It's a calculation from a 2006 baseline that gives you this overall figure. However, the problem is that this total number fails to account for inflation. So it's misleading. And as you know, with inflation, $1 today is worth much less than $1 of, say, 10 years ago, so you have to build that into your calculations. So I did take the trouble to adjust for inflation, and you should know that the figure is actually halved from what the figure you're suggesting and continually suggest through your speeches. So with this in mind, would you agree to revise your future statements to reflect a more accurate level of expenditure?
Well, inflation has been considerably low the last couple of years, certainly since 2006. With the management of the economy by this government, we've been working very well with a very low inflation rate. And to a bigger point, I see figures around the world, your funding as a percentage of GDP, gross domestic outputs, and so on and so forth. The bottom line is that this government, and you can't deny this, has put more than $9 billion, and you are, and I appreciate that you are admitting that that's true. You want me to calculate it for inflation and then give you that number. Well, I'm happy to calculate it any way you want, but the bottom line is $9 billion new dollars. Right now, the S&T budget in Canada is around $11 billion. When we took office, it was just over $5 billion. I don't see how inflation is that high. It certainly hasn't been where I'm living.
Well, again, it's
more money.
It is your global figure that you report, and it is, when you adjust for inflation, and you should do so because it's misleading if you don't, it's about half of what you're reporting. If we move on to the decline in funding, the same CanSim tables show that from the peak spending in 2010-2011, you've actually had a decline of S&T funding by 14.5%. And really, this takes the funding level down to almost exactly the same level of when you took over this job in 2006. So really, we've had no growth in spending at all. And in fact, since 2010-2011, we've had a 14.5% decline. So I'm wondering if you can explain this decline and tell us whether it will continue or not.
Well, again, if you do choose and select your statistics and your timelines, you can get any answer you want. In 2008-9, I believe it was budget 2009, there was $4.9 billion additional dollars. And while I know some people would want us to continue to spend that kind of money, we don't have a carbon tax coming up. That was a stimulus funding that was a temporary 2-year stimulus program, as you recall, and I'm sure you will recall that the government came forward with a fairly aggressive and quick stimulus program. It included billions of dollars for infrastructure, and $2 billion was for infrastructure for science research capacity at our universities and colleges. Well, we completed 550-something projects, highly successful, the vast majority on time, on budget. There was no need to continue that program, as, again, these were temporary stimulus programs. So, with all due respect to my honourable colleague, if you're going to take the year after all of those programs ended, you should see a decline, because we made the commitment to temporarily stimulate the economy, and we did, and those programs, most of them ended.
But the key is, in real terms, you're actually spending less than 2006. But I'll move on to the next.
Absolutely not true.
Let's move on to your planning and priorities document. Under the section of advancements in science and technology, it says here actual spending in 2010-2011 was $1.3 billion. But your projections for 2015-2016 comes out at $400 million, which is a kind of almost $1 billion. So just wondering if you can explain that. It's under your reports on plans and priorities from Industry Canada advancements in science and technology.
Mentioned 2016, I'm sorry.
2015-16, the Treasury Board report that comes out to tell us what your planning and priorities is, it starts with actual funding from 2010-2011, which is a $1.3 billion, and then when it goes out to 2015-2016, it declines to $414 million. So that's a $1 billion decline. Just wondering if you can tell me whether these cuts will...
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure how to handle this. My chart goes to 2015-16. Is that your
That's
chart?
what I just said, yeah.
Okay. Most of this would be addressed by a couple of things that I can tell, and perhaps Rob can fill in. One, again, the stimulus funding that ended would be reflected in that chart, but this year's budget would not be reflected in that chart.
Dollars, though.
There's $466 million in this year. There's $1.1 billion in last year's budget.
But just from this small slice of your overall spending of about $10 billion, you're losing $1 billion here. So
no, what I'm trying to ask you to do is compare. If you're going to compare the general from 2006 to where we are right now, then please do that.
No,
Don't
I'm just
compare
reading right out
one
of
year.
I'm reading right out of your Treasury Board document on planning and priorities.
And I just explained to you that in fact it includes and it reflects the end of the stimulus programs, one of which was the knowledge infrastructure program that's $2 billion. And the other answer I can give you is that it does not include this year's budget.
So will we substantially increase from the $400 million? I mean, $1.3 billion to $414 million is quite a huge drop. Are we going to go back to the levels of $1.3 billion, or can you tell us where we'll be at some point on this?
Very quick, I'm sorry. A lot of that answer would depend on how you and your party intend to vote on the budget, because there's $466 million in the budget. So we would hope that you would support it, because I do believe science and technology deserves that money.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Now on to Mr. Carmichael for 7 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, and to your colleagues for taking the time to join us today and to answer our questions. I'd like to begin with a brief discussion about the National Research Council. Economic Action Plan 2012 and 2013 both expressed significant investments into the refocusing of the NRC, and to the extent that in 2012 the investment was some $67 million, and in 2013 another $121 million, which you mentioned in your presentation, over 2 years. And the focus clearly is to help the growth and innovation of businesses in Canada. I wonder if, understanding that the NRC is a vital part of Canadian research, can you explain to the committee what is happening with the refocusing of this vital organization and what it means to overall research in Canada?
Well, thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. You are absolutely correct. The National Research Council, I might want to point out, is one of our councils. We have, as you know, a number of councils. We have looked at this research council and are working to transform this council into more of an industry-facing organization. This is to better align the National Research Council to an area that Canada needs some support in, and that is business, research and development. It is based on the recommendations from the Jenkins panel report, the expert panel report that you may recall. Now, as you point out, the focus will be to help businesses grow. It'll be to help high-growth businesses. It will be to help small businesses who do not generally have research capacity on site. So there is this new approach will allow us to offer to businesses in Canada the enormous resources of this National Research Council with all of the expertise, with all of the equipment, and in fairness, they've done a lot of this in the past. So we are in the process of transitioning it. We are identifying, obviously, those areas, those sectors that show greatest potential and are already strong in Canada. We do want our businesses to work more closely with our colleges and universities, and we will be announcing more details, if I can say that, in the months to come. This obviously is a large organization. There are a lot of scientists there. There are international scientists that help us with our work, and we cooperate, as you know, with other countries. So the process itself should take a little bit longer than you'd think, but we are obviously working to get this organization up and running as a research technology organization, which all that means is it will be the laboratory, if you will, for business in Canada. Now that's a very exciting thing. I can tell you, if I'm allowed, the Research Council is a perfect example of how they can work, and that is recently they've been involved in the world's first ever flight by a civil jet on 100% biofuels. So you can imagine this kind of research impact if we can move that information out into our private sectors, the enormous benefit of something like that can have on the economies, not just in Southern Ontario in this case, but all across Canada. So if we can help Canada's businesses in this regard, because as I've mentioned many times, we're number one in a number of areas in Canada, and certainly we're number one in our support of post-secondary institutions with respect to research and development as a percentage of our GDP, but we're nowhere close to number one in what's called BIRD, business expenditures on research and development. Businesses need to obviously spend money on research, but they do need help in making sure that research is reproducible, ends up being valid, and can be supported by other research. So they do need a quality research organization. They need a place to test their products, perhaps get certification on their products, and frankly get assistance in reaching those global markets that we're working so hard to open up.
Thank you. Got a couple of minutes left, and I got so much to ask.
My apologies.
I want to talk about FedDev, but maybe in context, just to include it, if there is time at the end of your comments, I'd like to hear more about the business initiative startup on venture capital funding, and also the Angel program on the business innovation initiative. As a business person, those are important issues to me. But if there's time, maybe you could comment on those. But I'd like to talk a bit about FedDev. Clearly, for those of us in business, we were hit hard in 2008 and in the region of Southern Ontario. And it's a region that's contributed largely to the manufacturing sector of this country. And in response, the Government of Canada acted quickly and created the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario in 2009, something that I truly applaud you for doing. Understanding that the Federal Economic Development Agency is vital to the reemergence of Southern Ontario, would you please give us, as a committee, an update on the agency's activities and possibly provide an example of where the money has been invested?
Do that, Mr. Chair. How much time do I have?
Over a minute.
Excellent.
You got a minute.
I will do my best. Obviously, the agency has done very, very well in Southern Ontario. That is the reason that we are renewing it. The other reason, of course, is that we're not out of trouble. The manufacturing industry and other sectors in Southern Ontario face everything from an unstable United States global market, pressures around the dollar, venture capital, as you've mentioned. We did a lot of stakeholder consultations in setting up the original programs, and they were designed to assist that. The venture capital market is something that also the Jenkins panel recommended the government have a look at. The government as a whole has taken a serious approach to this with money in the budget for venture capital. Southern Ontario, we saw a great possibility of increasing the angel investor capacity of the Southern Ontario market, and so we developed a program to do just that, and it has been highly successful. I will give you an example. I have tons of examples here, unfortunately, but I will give you one of the Ice River Springs Water Company. This is a family-owned business that produces private labeled spring water. But the company expressed a desire to become more environmentally sustainable in all of its materials and practices, but they were limited by space. They came to FedDev, they showed us this opportunity to not only help the environment and buy more locally, but increase jobs. So we ended up helping them. They have now converted an automotive manufacturing plant, which saw some contraction, as you know, into the first food-grade recycled resin manufacturing facility in Canada. Now, depending, they are selling to the foreign markets. They've got new products. They've created 36 full-time jobs. That's my best. My apologies, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister Goodyear. Now on to Mr. Regan for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Minister, for coming with your officials as well. You spoke a few moments ago kind of taking credit for low interest rates the past few years. I think, well, that's what it seemed like. I guess I think you probably agree that the recession and the low growth we've seen since then had a big impact. And we, of course, leave most of that to the management of the Bank of Canada, who do a pretty good job.
Of course.
According to the recent tabled Plans and Priorities report, it appears that FedDev we'll see budget cuts next year, as we've heard a bit already. How much will they be?
FedDev, as you probably know, did go through a process of finding efficiencies. I will tell Bruce, my president here, to give you the exact numbers. There were some decreases in the grants and contributions. We found efficiencies in how we did business. And we amalgamated one office from Stratford to Kitchener. That's the genesis of the savings, and I will defer to my colleague.
So in terms of budget 13-14, our actual net for grants and contributions went up 5.9 million year over year, but that was actually a combination of a number of things. We had an added 24.8 million for the Community Innovation Infrastructure Fund. An increase of 1.5 million for the Brant remediation project, and those were offset by a decrease to our Southern Ontario Development Program of 18.8 million and a decrease of 1.25 million in the Community Futures Program and 0.2 million for the Economic Development Initiative, which were all part of Budget's 2012 budget exercise. In terms of operating dollars, our operating dollars decreased in 13-14, 1.1 million as a result of the budget 2012. 0.4 million went to Shared Services Canada. 0.1 million was transferred to Treasury Board, who are now going to look after our audit function in the regional agencies, and 0.2 went to Employee Benefits Program.
For the overall, I said how much will it be? So am I right? It's pretty hard to add and subtract that fast, but am I right that it's about 14 million down, reduced by about 14 million in net? Is that where we are?
No, the net is up.
Yeah, it depends which piece we're looking at.
Because you mentioned the 5.9 million increase in grants and contributions, a decrease of 18.8, a decrease of 1.25, a decrease of 0.2. So I'm sorry, but the net you're saying is an increase. Because the impression you got from the Plans and Priorities report is that it actually is a decrease.
So if you look at the main estimates for 13-14, it's $194 million, and main estimates for 2012 was 188.9 million dollars. So that's sort of the year-over-year comparison on the mains.
Looking at these numbers, Table 8, main estimates, Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. Yes. It says the estimates to date for 2012-13, so to the previous year, 261 million. Main estimates 2013-14, 222 million.
Yes.
So that's a decrease, is it not?
It is a decrease, yes. Okay.
I'll step in. The difference is we got in-year funding through Budget 2012, and that included a top-up to our Southern Ontario Development Program, as well as the estimates to date don't include the CF funding. So we've got, don't include the budget cuts that were happened in year to our programs.
So beyond that, we're looking at, it appears at a reduction of $920 million from this year's budget. It indicates a reduction in the following years after that of $920 million over the following 5 years. Does that represent a 20% annual cut for FedDev compared to the previous 5 years?
Actually, if I may, honourable colleague, I think we're jumping the gun a little bit, and if I can try to explain the $920 million, this is something that we know about. FedDev in the past has been the administrator of other funds, which might increase the numbers of previous years. As you know, in this budget, there is an announcement of some significant infrastructure money in Building Canada. We do not know yet where that administrative responsibility might land. FedDev over the last number of years, colleague, has handled things like the recreational infrastructure program, the Community Adjustment Fund, the Community Innovation Investment Fund, CIF as we call it. So these all added to those numbers. What you're looking at right now is the pure $920 million.
So the $222 million for this current fiscal year, that's not simply your bare bones budget. There's a lot of other things that are some of those other funds you're administering that are in there. That, I mean, it makes it hard to tell how much you actually have for the core purposes that you're engaged in.
We are very happy because we do, in fact, and if I may just say this, we do have an agency that is ready to operate. They are extremely experienced on managing large volumes of applications, dealing through those, writing up contribution agreements, negotiating them. So it isn't unusual for us to be asked to manage another program because we frankly do it so well.
We're having difficulty understanding what funding you're going to have over the next 5 years, and we're trying to assess the estimates as parliamentarians, and based upon difficulties parliamentarians have had the last few years in determining what government spending is going to be, even has been sometimes, you'll understand how difficult it is when, you know, when I can't get a clear answer and you aren't able to give me one to that kind of question.
The reason, quite clearly, is that's why we have SUPS A, SUPS B, SUPS C. That's why every few months these estimates are modified to reflect what is added to the agency.
But budget changes. I mean, I was going to call them budget cuts, but it's not a little fuzzy. I mean, clearly we see a change, you know, as I mentioned, you know, between this year and next. But at any rate, will there be employment reductions, or will there be a reduction or increase in transfers to your clients?
Maybe I can let you answer that because, again, you know, it depends on what we're looking at. And I don't want to jump the gun here, but some of our employees are... I apologize.
As brief as possible, please.
I'll let you handle it.
So with the announcement in budget 2013, there's $920 million for the next 5 years, and so the operating budget for the agency, grants and contributions and operating, is $184 million each year. What we don't know at this point is whether or not there will be added elements for infrastructure delivery or other programming that could come from other departments in the federal government that we often deliver on their behalf. But that's sort of the base piece for us for the next 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Archibald. Mr. Regan. We'll now move on to our 5-minute round of questions, and for that round to begin, Mr. McColeman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here, and your staff and those people who you've hired in senior positions. I'd like to just return just quickly to FedDev. In the early days, I know how important it was as this was formed out of the infrastructure program to communities like mine, which have a very proud manufacturing background, city of Brantford in particular. Turn of the century was the 3rd largest manufacturing city in Canada, only behind Toronto and Montreal. And can you tell me some of the early statistics in terms of in the first introduction, in the first couple of years, what we achieved? Because I know it was hugely significant in the case of my community.
Certainly, I'll try to just summarize this time. First of all, the agency got started in August of 2009, halfway through the fiscal year. We took it upon ourselves to look for partnering opportunities with agencies that had a history of doing very well. The Industrial Research Assistance Program, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, Canadian Manufacturing and Exporters, SMART program, just to name a few. So we knew at that time it was imperative that we got assistance into these communities around Southern Ontario. Very quickly, we looked for partners that had connections and existing relationships. But we also went on the road and did consultations with communities, with economists, with planners in these little communities around Southern Ontario, and collected all this data. This is where we came up with companies and communities saying, we only have one employer and we need to diversify. So we have 3, 4 employers. We need venture capital. We need infrastructure. We've got scientists that don't know how to run a business, but they've got great ideas. So we developed a series of programs that, as I've mentioned earlier, we called the Southern Ontario Advantage, and they were to try to approach these gaps. But I will tell you that the criteria changed so that it wasn't so much just simply getting money into the community. We continually upped the game to require a longer-term economic benefit to the community. So today, our programs are based on diversification of communities by looking for, trying to get to the communities and educate them that these programs are available. We can't fund anything if we don't have an application. So that's been a bit of a challenge. But we've been able to move significant, on the venture capital side, we've leveraged some $147 million, 81 high-growth startup companies, 2,400 high-quality jobs created there. The money's repayable. This is a very important thing. We've had folks like Dr. Oetker, who was looking all over North America, German company. We ended up landing that company in Southern Ontario, again for a repayable loan, whereas other countries, as you can imagine, are offering some significant grants. But the overall tax base, I think, has been attracting them as it's so low. One example here is, go back to the Research Commercialization Initiative, 85% of the people in that program indicated their projects met or exceeded most of their original objectives. 50% indicated that as a result of the ARC program, Applied Research Commercialization, they are expecting sales increases greater than 75%. Do I have a few more minutes? Another one is this, the partnership with Canadian manufacturers exporters are projecting that the funding we delivered to them, they've leveraged up to $95 million while assisting 800 Southern Ontario manufacturing businesses, and their objective is to increase their productivity, their competitiveness on a global scale, and created some 5,000 jobs. I could continue on with this. We have Chango is another one I remember, whose sales increased over 500% as a result of working with students under our FedDev programs. And the next year, they're predicting over 800% increase on that numbers. I think that we are looking at the opportunity here to shift the environment, not just create jobs, but create high-quality jobs in a new economy. And I think, obviously, that is what other folks think, hence the agreement to renew the project. What we need now, obviously, is that it has to pass. We have to have the budget
Thank you very much, Minister Goodyear and Mr. Coleman. Mr. Coleman, now on to Ms. Liu for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's wonderful to be able to question you today, Mr. Goodyear. So let's move right on to the devastating report that the Conference Board of Canada published a few weeks ago on the state of innovation in Canada. And I'll cite a few excerpts from this report, which says, despite a decade or so of innovation agendas and prosperity reports, Canada remains near the bottom of its peer group on innovation, ranking 13 among 16 peer countries. Moreover, countries that are more innovative are passing Canada on measures such as income per capita, productivity, and quality of social programs. Moreover, the report states that so far there are no conclusive answers or solutions to Canada's poor innovation ranking. So I find this quite embarrassing. Your government has been trying to fix this for almost a decade. How do you explain your horrible record on innovation?
Well, actually, productivity innovation is a decades-old problem. I have had the, as you would put it, the unfortunate experience of reading all these reports, C.D. Howe, Red Wilson report, the Jenkins report, Deloitte and Touche. I've read them back to the 60s. And in some cases, you would think that they were written this summer. Now, I'm not saying that that's a good thing. What I'm saying is that improving a country's productivity is a difficult thing, and it's hard to measure. You can't make a change this year and then expect to see the change next year. Fact is, we have seen some increase in productivity measurements, but in my view, it is for a quarter and doesn't necessarily in itself signify the trend that we want. But this comes right back to exactly why in 2007 we set up our science and technology strategy. This is exactly why we look to encourage businesses to partner with our academic communities so that we can move that knowledge, and there is a lot of that knowledge, down into our factories.
Sure, but despite that, we know that gross domestic expenditures on R&D is at its lowest level in 10 years, falling from 2.09% in 2001 to 1.74% in 2011, and I find that to be quite a devastating record. But I'd like to move on to the NRC, and as mentioned earlier in questioning. So we know that you put $67 million in restructuring the NRC. There's no plan, or at least you haven't released it to the public, so we have no idea where this government's going. But Mr. McDougall has also indicated that the total number of positions at the NRC will stay the same, the number of researchers employed by the NRC will actually decline. So can you tell us how many researchers will be losing their jobs this year?
Well, in the next coming months, we will, in fact, speak in much more detail about the transition process. But again, to reflect the point that businesses obviously need some additional assistance, businesses are the ones that promote or are responsible, if you will, primarily for innovation and productivity in the country. We do know that, but there are a number of factors for this, and I know that you appreciate that. It is everything from whether or not Canadians in general are the risk takers that Americans are, and I don't think they are. But that doesn't mean we want to be Americans. As it was put to me very clearly by another gentleman that I've consulted with, there is a cost here, and we don't mind paying that cost to be Canadian. We live in a wonderful country. We have low taxes. We've got natural resources, relatively safe streets compared to so many. But I think with the productivity gap between the Americans, for example, in Canada, we're actually paying too much at this point. So the reasons for the government to put focus on encouraging businesses to be more innovative, to be more competitive, to be more productive by incentivizing them to buy the latest machinery, skills training so their employees can, in fact, learn the latest technologies.
The researchers there to actually make the groundbreaking discoveries.
That's absolutely correct. But our researchers will continue to do research. They will be doing it for businesses in this case.
So I'd like to move on to NSERC. Tables 1 and 8 on NSERC's own facts and figures page paint a clear and quite worrying picture of basic research capacity in Canada. Since your government came into power in 2006, the discovery component of the people, discovery, and innovation streams received $422 million. But in 2010-2011, this stream received only $421 million, a $1 million reduction, which I find quite worrying.
Sorry, colleague, 1 million?
It went from $422 million in 2006 to $421 million in 2010-2011. However, when we adjust for inflation, this turns into actually a $30 million cut to discovery. So can you confirm this figure, and can we expect this trend to continue?
Just as briefly as possible, because we're over time, Minister. But
so the question, just for clarity for my official, is we provide $420-something million, and your chart shows it's 1 million less. 1 million less.
But that's not adjusted for inflation.
That's right.
The figure is correct. I think as the Minister was saying earlier, though, there's no official program that only supports discovery research as opposed to a program that supports applied research. So some of the activities that take place that people under NSERC apply for as for a discovery grant is actually quite applied, or as the Minister said, applied and not yet applied, while as other elements of the NSERC budget have gone up. Which,
thank you, Mr. Dunlop. I'm sorry, we're way over time. I just want to try and give you an opportunity to answer that. Now on to Mr. Braid for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, and your officials from FedDev for being here today. Now, of course, we're here today to discuss and to review the main estimates for FedDev Ontario. Now, Minister, when FedDev was first created in 2010, I believe the original funding envelope was $1 billion. Is that correct?
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years. And of course, it was a brand new agency at the time, so out of that $1 million, we required some funding and investment to create the agency, to build it from the ground up. Is that not a fair statement?
That's correct.
Budget 2013 provides renewed funding to FedDev of $920 million. Now, that to me is pretty much an apples-to-apples comparison in terms of funding for FedDev over 5 years. Is that not correct?
Well, I mean, in fairness, we were given $1 billion over 5 years. Yes, we had some additional costs that we will not have as we move forward. And we are, as long as the budget passes, looking at $920 million over 5 years.
Excellent. Now, when I look at the main estimates, so page 134, and of course the annual, or the process for departmental spending in the federal government is an annual process. That's why we have annual main estimates. That's why we have, Minister, as you indicated, subs A's and B's and C's. That's why our plans for departmental priorities, planning and priorities, are annual documents. Now, when I look at the main estimates and compare the main estimates for 2012, 2013 to 2013-14, I see a net increase of $4 million or 2% when you compare the mains to the mains, or apples to apples. So I'm not quite sure why there's confusion on the other side of the table. In addition, one of the reasons there is a net increase in the mains is because, as I understand it, FedDev was asked to administer the Community Infrastructure Improvement Fund, which increased funding for this year by $25 million. So again, is it not accurate to say that even though this budget has renewed funding for FedDev over 5 years of $920 million, that any future budget from the government could potentially increase that funding envelope?
Well, of course, simple answer is absolutely it can. And I think that it's important to point out that that the government prefers, especially in these difficult economic times that we still face from around the world, to be nimble, to be flexible, to meet the needs that currently face Canadians, not what faced them 5 years ago or 30 years ago.
Now, speaking of the budget, the past budget that was recently tabled, you indicated in your opening comments, for example, there's an investment of $60 million over 5 years to help outstanding and high potential incubator and accelerator organizations or centers in Canada. Could you elaborate on the importance of that particular new program, the purpose it will serve, what it will achieve, why it's important, and when that funding may begin to roll out?
Let me just start at the front of it. Colleagues, accelerators, incubators are an opportunity for businesses to kind of get some mentorship from other businesses, and in some cases academics as well. And this has been proven to be an extremely valuable step up for our businesses. It decreases their costs of starting up, and it improves their probability of successfully remaining in business. So what we have done is we have invested and supported a number of accelerator incubators around the country. As is the case in any multiple group of organizations, you do tend to have a variety of performance metrics. Now, the truth be told, most of these are operating extremely well. Some of them are quite superior to the others. So what we want to do is provide additional support to get the plan right, the approach right, the strategy right of what an incubator and accelerator will do. Minister of Finance, Minister Flaherty, has, in his wisdom, and I completely support it, has provided some funding that we will be looking at some of the most exceptional incubators on a pilot program to see how we can get them to move to the next level. And I should stop right there because that's about the end of the knowledge I have for that program. So I will just, it looks like I'm getting the signal that I'm done anyways, yeah. But hopefully that will answer your question. And as is always, one, the budget has to pass first, and then of course we will take consultations underway to see how to roll this out and who ultimately will be, which ministry will be responsible for this program.
Thank you, Minister. Colleagues, it's 4:30, so we'll take a moment to postpone, suspend, and Minister will be. I understand you're here from 3:30 to 4:30, Minister.
I am. I unfortunately do have to go. I just want to thank my colleagues for the opportunity to come and share some time with all of you. It is the most important file, as I know you agree, and I'm very excited about it, and I'm here to answer questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll suspend for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks,
okay, Bruce.
Yep. ladies and gentlemen, we're back here for questions of the officials now, and it's actually Mr. Harris's slot at the moment, but he's will obviously return momentarily, so I'll let Madame Gallant go ahead and we'll have them switch spots. Madam Gallant for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our government has made significant investments in science and technology since 2006, and we often hear the minister highlighting different investments that we've made. Now, when the global economic downturn occurred, everyone had to make adjustments. How have the measures that this government has taken impacted upon your portfolio?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. As the minister was explaining, what the government chose to do in their Regional Economic Action Plan, primarily for science and technology, was very stimulus-based, with the idea that this is something that would begin and was something that would end, and with the idea of leaving a tangible legacy at that time. So the minister highlighted the Knowledge Infrastructure Program. That was $2 billion for infrastructure in universities and colleges. As the minister said, the program was completed on budget and on time. 554 projects across the country that increased the capacity of universities and colleges to do research, but also a significant number of those projects were related to things like energy efficiency, so that as the stimulus ends, the savings to the institutions begin, and instead of having created an ongoing problem that has to be funded, what you've in fact created is savings and ongoing advantage. There were other elements as well that, again, were stimulus-based, so that the intent was for them to end as well as to have an impact at a time when the economy was in dire straits.
Okay. Recently, I had the opportunity to do a presentation announcement to Pillar 5 in Arnprior. It was formerly a pharmaceutical manufacturer, but the community got together to keep the plant open, and now they package different over-the-counter items, one of them being a Visine. Now, in this announcement, it was a fully repayable loan to purchase a machine that would help with the sterile aspects of an ophthalmic solution. So my question is, could you tell us about that program and how well it has been received, and whether or not you've been able to measure the positive effects in terms of number of jobs created or that are anticipated to be created once the equipment and training has occurred?
Well, Mr. Chair, I believe that program is administered by FedNor. Is that an Industry Canada program?
It's
It's one of yours. Okay, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'll ask Clerk Gartley to talk about that particular program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That Pillar 5 project, I think it was just recently announced, was funded under what we call our Prosperity Initiative. When Minister Goodyear was here, he mentioned the suite of Southern Ontario Advantage initiatives that were developed several years ago and that fund a number of different programs and projects. So one of those initiatives is the Prosperity Initiative. We've had a lot of interest in that initiative, and it does a number of things. It supports business productivity, so we've worked with people like the Canadian manufacturers and exporters in supporting productivity in businesses. It supports diversification of regional economies, and it helps build economic clusters. So Pillar 5 was one of the projects, one of the many projects funded under that initiative. And they're basically moving into more of a knowledge economy, creating high-value jobs, and certainly was a good fit for the initiative.
Okay. So I understand that that particular project is anticipated to generate another 50 jobs at a plant where there's already 100. So overall, do you have any numbers yet on what the projected increase in employment will be under that particular program?
We, first of all, I should mention for all our programs that we deliver, we have in place performance measurement strategies. So we're tracking a number of different performance indicators, right from the output level to the longer-term outcome level. It's still pretty early days because FedDev's only been in existence for 3.5 years, but we have a 5-year evaluation plan for our programs. We have already started to do quite a bit of evaluation work, and part of that was because of working towards renewal of our funding. Some of the evaluation on many of the projects that we did in our first couple of years, so 2009 to 2011, would indicate something over 25,000 jobs as a result of the projects funded just in those first couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Garley. Sorry, the time is way on us. Now, because of our adjustment, we'll have 2 spots, and we'll go to Mr. Harris for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for staying with us for the second hour. Ms. Liu earlier spoke about productivity and the challenges that we face. Another aspect to that is investments into the IT sector. Currently, Canadian businesses are only spending about 58% of what their counterparts in the United States spend in the IT sector, and of course this is a major barometer for productivity and investment in innovation. And I'd like to know what in the budget is actually seeking to correct that, to bridge that gap in IT sector funding and business.
So in the budget, as the Minister had mentioned earlier, the agency was renewed for $920 million over the next 5 years. So over the course of the next months, we're going to go and conduct a number of roundtables across Southern Ontario and talk about areas of programming that we may want to design as we go forward for the next 5 years. And certainly the area of information and communication technology is one that's going to be, I think, of great interest. Also in our funding, there was an allocation designated for Advanced Manufacturing Fund of $200 million over the course of those 5 years. And clearly one of the sectors that we're very interested in from a manufacturing point of view is the whole ICT space. So we will also be consulting on the design and delivery of that program, and those are areas that we're going to look at. In the past, though, we have done some investments in the area of ICT. We've made a number of investments through our Prosperity Initiative to look at high-performance cloud computing. Made an investment of about $20 million to date. We've also made a number of investments in our Investing in Business Innovation to actually create startups of ICT firms in Southern Ontario. So there has been some activity in the first years of FedDev, and I expect we'll continue to work in that space on a going forward basis.
Cloud computing, which is still largely misunderstood by a lot of people, is one of those growth areas in the future. However, here in Canada, with the strict limitations on bandwidths that are placed on consumers and businesses, that severely restricts and limits the ability of business to take advantage of that, because when you only have, say, 60 gigabytes of bandwidth per month, you're not going to be able to go beyond that, otherwise the cost becomes prohibitive. However, that's more a question for Minister Paradis when he comes on May 2nd. Now, you mentioned the round tables, because really it is important to come together with a plan as to how to properly spend the money to actually have the greatest effect. Now, what kind of stakeholders and are going to be included in those roundtables? Has there been a decision as to how many, where they're going to be, or has that plan not been put in place yet?
We haven't formalized any plan at this point. We've had some conversations internally within the agency and some preliminary conversations with the minister, but I think we've actually used roundtables very effectively in the past. They've actually been a very good way to assemble a lot of people from a variety of different experiences and background fairly quickly and to get some good input. So we use that very much in the design of our early programming. As we did some refinement, we brought those together, and our expectation is we're going to do the same over the next few months as we try to go back out and seek guidance in terms of what went well in terms of programming, what are areas where there are still some gaps that we may want to look at, what are areas where we may want to reallocate resources because there's other people working in those spaces.
Are you planning on doing more than roundtables in order to get the information required, or just roundtables?
Now, we're also planning to work with our colleagues in other levels of government, obviously being based in a regional agency for Ontario and Southern Ontario, close ties with the provincial government. We've established good working relationships with them in the past. I've done some interesting projects in various regions of the province, so obviously we'll be consulting with our colleagues there, as well as with key trade associations. We've had a lot of good discussions with people like the Canadian Manufacturers Exporters Association, Eve Laundry Foundation, so we'll also do some consultations with associations as well.
And thank you very much, and I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Now on to Mr. Stewart for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for coming, answering questions. Just wondering, the NRC was allocated $67 million in the financial year 2012-2013. Just wondering what that's being used for. If you could be specific, that would be great. Okay.
That money was used for, as I said in the budget, to facilitate the transition that the NRC management has been working on, and that, as the minister said, would be announced shortly.
And is there any details you can provide on that funding, or is it for balloons and party hats, or is there something more specific that?
Well, premature for a party.
Mr. Chair, the funds were used for the ongoing activities of the National Research Council, and paying their staff and running their businesses and running their facilities and conducting the research.
When would we have a more specific breakdown? Would it be something you could table later that would give us a specific breakdown of what that was used for, or is it just in the general revenues?
If I'm being asked if a formal answer could be provided to, of course.
Okay, thank you. So as part of the NRC transition, we're just wondering the effects on the number of positions, specifically the science or research positions, compared to the administrative positions. And last time Mr. McDougall was here, he did say there would be a significant reduction in scientific research personnel. We're just wondering if you could provide an update on that at all.
Mr. Chair, I can't provide an update. I'd suggest Mr. McDougall would be better placed to provide detailed answers on management.
Perhaps that's something we could do then, is have Mr. McDougall come back to the committee and answer those questions about the NRC. I'll leave that with the committee to ponder. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, thanks. So let's see. So maybe we can just go back to the overall calculations of science and technology spending, as I asked the minister. Just the $9 billion number and how that's calculated. So it doesn't look like inflation is accounted for in that number. Is that something you can confirm as well?
Mr. Chair, that government accounting is always done on nominal dollars. That's main estimates and votes are all based on nominal dollars, not inflation adjusted, and the tables you've seen are. Yeah.
So how about the percentage decline then in S&T spending? It's just hard when you're looking at nominal figures. It always keeps growing and growing and growing, and that's why we inflation adjust. And actually, Statistics Canada does do that for us in particular tables. I'm just wondering, is there any part of reports where that would be formally reported, or is that something the public have to do themselves?
Well, Mr. Chair, if you're speaking of, if the question's about the information that's available from Stats Canada, as you say, they provide both nominal and inflation adjusted, depending on which particular table you're looking at. So that information is widely available.
Okay. So maybe we could go back to the planning and priorities report that we talked to before, and that's the advancement in science and technology. So we have the two, I'm not sure if you have that in front of you, but the actual spending in 2010-2011 is $1.3 billion, declining to $414 million. I know there's some projects that still have to be funded or approved by Treasury Board to be added into this table, but will the funding ever come close to hitting the 2010-2011 level?
Well, I did pull together the information on the differences, and it's as the minister was saying, the primary elements there were the taking out of KIP, the temporary program, which was $1 billion a year. There's a few other programs that are set for review. The funding that was provided to the quantum computing and for the Ivy Center, for example, that were announced, those could be reviewed and perhaps renewed, but they are not included because that's not a decision. That's a decision that we made in the future. There's also a few elements that are missing from the 2015-16 figure that have since been announced. They include the $500 million for CFI that, although announced in last year's budget, because it was to begin funding in the fund flow was to start in 14-15, wasn't included until now, but that's been announced and will be confirmed shortly. Also not included is the $165 million for Genome and the $13 million for MyTax. So I can't obviously say what the budget for science and technology will be in 2015-16, but I can tell you that there's a large number of elements that are in place that would make that gap certainly a lot smaller than you see there.
Okay, thank you.
Now on to Mr. Braid for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Archibald, you mentioned in a response to an earlier question between now and when the mandate for FedDev is renewed, about a year from now, that you'll be carrying out extensive consultations with respect to what the renewed FedDev will look like. You must have a sense today of what's worked well so far. Could you tell us what you think has worked well given the FedDev mandate?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So one of the interesting things about this regional agency is that it actually operates in a very large and diverse economy in terms of Canada. So, a real GDP of somewhere in the neighborhood of $600 billion and a very diverse economic base. And so one of the things that in consultations with various stakeholders and obviously through Minister Goodyear's guidance and direction, we've tried to make our investments in sort of areas where we actually can foster partnerships and really try to improve the productivity piece, as well as build communities, as well as look for opportunities in terms of gaps, in terms of the landscape of the various players. So I think we've been very successful in actually helping bring large consortium together, ideas on projects that actually can make a difference in terms of the transformation of the economy in Southern Ontario. One example we've had is there's a fair bit of understanding and expertise in the area of water management, water conservation, purification, number of those issues. Early on, we had a number of applications from various players to try to look for pieces of that puzzle. I think we worked very hard with a number of industries as well as universities to actually build a much stronger proposal, much larger proposal that involved several universities, a number of private sector partners, leveraged considerable amount of investment and actually made a significant investment in the area of water technology in Southern Ontario, which I think is the model that we think is the way to really make a difference. We have done smaller investments with specific companies, but I think some of those transformational pieces are in those areas. That's one example. The other areas in communities, clearly I think a number of communities were seriously impacted as a result of the economic downturn and have worked hard to try to reinvent and think about where they need to go on a going forward basis. We've worked very diligently with a number of those. Windsor is an example where a very large area that was largely dependent on auto assembly, those jobs left, and how does it actually recreate itself? So through working with the community, the mayor, the local universities, the local chamber of commerce, I think they came together with a couple of very credible plans on a going forward basis. and we've made some investments in those areas, and recently have done some work in the Niagara region, which is similar in terms of those areas. And then the last area that the Minister referenced is that in the area of early-stage financing, we heard a lot in the roundtables about access to capital had disappeared. So we looked at some opportunities to see what we could do to encourage people to come back into that market, to make more investments in creating Canadian companies, and so those things have gone well. So community activity, but really built up by the community itself, where we help bringing large consortium together, and in areas where there are known gaps to try to work in those areas, and that's really been our emphasis.
And that's a great segue to my next question. Of course, FedDev was created with the mandate to support economic growth, create jobs, foster innovation. Do you have any specific metrics that you can share on how you've been achieving those goals that are part of your mandate?
Sure. Very briefly, please, Mr. Archibald.
But it's such a good question.
I know. We do develop an evaluation plan for the agency. We have looked at a number of different evaluations in various parts of our programs, and while it's still early days for the organization, there has been some significant improvement in terms of job creation activities in those kinds of areas. So the answer is yes, and I think we've got some positive feedback.
Thank you very much, Mr. Archibald. Now we're on to the second 5-minute round, and moving to Mr. Mick Coleman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Sweet, our chair. I'd like to pick up on what the minister talked about in terms of the tremendous growth in the support of angel capital funding, and ask you from your points of view, from your various part of the equation here in carrying out the mandate here for FedDev. Can you give us either some examples or some it may not be measurable or empirical data that you can easily put your fingers on immediately, but just a sense of how that private capital growth has happened, and some of the reasons perhaps why you believe it has happened.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask Claire Gertley to respond to that one.
Thank you for the question. As Dr. Archibald mentioned, this is one of the areas that we identified early on in the agency that we felt was a place where we could play a role in making a change. Angel capital had really declined quite substantially in Ontario, and it was difficult for good ideas, good businesses to find the capital that they needed to get going. It took a number of things. First of all, a strong ecosystem, innovation ecosystem that was encouraging people to start up businesses and look at commercializing new IP and new technologies. So that was happening. There's various things at play there, and certainly something that communities and post-secondary institutions and the province were very involved in. To address the capital issue, we really had a lot of discussions with both some of the existing angel networks that are located in Southern Ontario and some of the key venture capitalists that are in Southern Ontario. And we heard from them that if we would help them in the way of matching some of the capital that they put into these companies, that would encourage more activity. And so we devised a program called Investing Business Innovation that was launched a couple of years ago. We now have funded over 80 startup companies through that program with repayable contributions, repayable loans. Our funding is in at a third of the total cost of the project, up to $1 million. The unique thing about the program, though, is that these companies, these startup businesses, have to come to us first with either angel, VC, or both funding in place. So we're not picking them. They're being picked by the investment community out there as good prospects, and then they come to us, and then if everything's in place, we put in our third of the funding. And the model has worked, I think, because stakeholders had a lot to do with it, and because the timing was good. It was something really needed, and it's generated a lot of response. The interesting thing, early on, we thought most of the funding would come from angels, private individuals that are working perhaps in a network and investing in these startups. As time went on, the venture capital community has joined in. And in fact, now about half of the funding that's gone into these over 80 startup companies is from the venture capital community, and the other half from angels.
It's a tremendous success story, really, of the work you've done, because coming from owning my own business and my background in that area is that this is one of the issues, particularly small businesses deal with, small and medium-sized businesses, is when you want to go to the next level, is how do you generate the dollars to do that? And so I guess the next step in the questioning here would be, do you see that as being a strong component as you move forward, as you look at the next 5-year funding envelope that Budget 2013 has laid out?
So as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, we are in the process of designing a consultation process with a number of roundtables, and we have done some preliminary thinking of areas that we want to go back and ask a number of experts across the province where they think there are continued opportunities or new opportunities, and this is one of the ones that we're going to probe on in terms of, so we've had this program. From our perspective, it seems to have filled a niche and been successful. Our initial evaluation has been very positive in terms of the results of it. Is there a continued need? Does it need to be modified? Those are things that we're going to be asking.
Thank you.
Mr. McColman.
Thank you, Mr. Sweet.
Now on to Mr. Thibault for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I'd like to thank the department officials for attending today. I know appearing before a parliamentary committee isn't always the most pleasant experience for you, especially when you get tossed into the political fray every once in a while. So once again, thanks for your professionalism and for being here today. So now we know that estimates provide an opportunity for parliamentarians to obviously examine and ask questions about planned government spending for the upcoming fiscal year. We also know there's a direct correlation between government expenditures and revenue. So here, there's a trade-off what can be made between raising taxes and increasing deficits to maintain expenditures. There's been much discussion about one particular revenue-generating aspect of the budget, namely revisions to the general preferential tariff, which will increase the cost of hundreds of consumer goods, including iPods, bicycles, baby carriages, coffee makers, scissors, rubber sandals, vinegar, umbrellas, paintbrushes, and perfume, just to name a few. These changes are found on page 332 of the Conservatives' Economic Action Plan, will have a major impact on industry, on retailers and consumers, and certainly merits, in my opinion, the examination of this by the Industry Committee. So therefore, Mr. Chair, I'd like to therefore move the following motion and then speak to it, that the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology undertake a study into the increased taxation of hundreds of consumer goods detailed in Budget 2013, including the 5% tax increase on iPods and MP3 players, the possibility that TVs and other goods may have been taxed retroactively, and the impact of these tax changes for consumers, retailers, and industry, and that the committee reports its finding back to the House. Can I speak to this now, Mr. Speaker?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. So far, what we've heard seems to be more relevant to the Finance Committee. This is Industry Committee. I would say that this motion is out of order.
Well, Madam Gallant, I understand your point, but as far as procedure, I'm going to have to let it stand, and he has the liberty to be able to speak to his motion now. We are on a time frame, so I'll adjust the clock, and you have about 2 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also to Madame Gallant's point of order. The office and the Department of Consumer Affairs falls under industry, and many of the manufacturing sector that falls within this sector also comes under industry. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. The study should get to the bottom of the ongoing debate regarding the taxation of iPods and other MP3 players, as well as the plethora of other consumer goods which will be subjected to this conservative increase levied on the backs of Canadian consumers and Canadian industry, as well as give the committee information on the reporting and registry of information related to tariff waivers. My Conservative colleagues opposite will no doubt tell you that the tariff isn't a tax, but simply it isn't true, Mr. Chair. Let me stamp out that argument from the outset. Even the Encyclopedia Britannica defines a tariff as a tax levied upon goods as they cross national boundaries, usually by the government of the importing country. The government can call these tariff changes whatever they want, but that doesn't change what they are, a tax increase. And one that will hit the poorest Canadians the hardest. Mike Moffat, an assistant professor at the University of Western Ontario, has summarized the entirety of these tariff changes most succinctly when he said, these tax increases are also likely to be regressive in nature. The inconsistencies of the Conservative plan to increase the cost of hundreds of consumer goods are apparent to analysts and industry leaders from across the spectrum of Canadian business. One such inconsistency involves the Conservatives' flagship policy of reducing tariffs on hockey equipment. Yet shockingly, I've discovered that hockey helmets won't be covered by the reduction. Hockey helmets are imported under Chapter 65 of the Customs Tariff Schedule, 6506.10.90.10 for those that are interested in that, for protective headgear, athletic specifically. However, no Chapter 65 duties are listed to be changed in Budget 2013, so this means protective headgear for sports will continue to be charged at the most favored...
Moment, please, Mr. Thibeault.
Sure.
Mr. Lake.
I just wonder, the NDP obviously have a political end here, a game that they want to play that probably doesn't involve our witnesses, and perhaps we could release our witnesses from the meeting today.
Well, at this point in time, we're kind of in the middle of what I would call procedure as well as customary practice. So what I was intending to do was to allow Mr. Thibeault to exhaust his time, because that's the practice aspect we're in.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then it would be to the Conservatives to have the floor after that, and then we'd be in open debate.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just continuing, I'm sure I'm almost out of time, Mr. Chair. So having our committee undertake a study into the impact which these tariff increases will have on consumers, retailers, and the industry will allow us to get to the bottom of these inconsistencies to flesh out what has and has not been subjected to this increase. I will encourage all members of this committee to support this motion and would like to immediately proceed to a vote on the substance of this motion, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thibeault. Mr. Lake.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Of course, the regular and long-standing practice when we're dealing with committee businesses to do that business in camera, so I move that we go in camera.
Dilatory motion, so all in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's carried. I'll say we're going to move into camera, so I want to say thank you very much to our witnesses. I appreciate your testimony, and we'll suspend while we go into camera.